The muzzle flash of the M4, lit against the backglow of floodlights, reflected across Hannah Carter's face as she tapped lightly on the bolt carrier, hearing a faint click enough to know the rifle wasn't entirely sound. In the middle of the outdoor firing range at Camp Coyle, San Diego, she stopped firing, took a long breath, then smiled. A Navy SEAL stepped into view, throat dry, eyes following the path of each round, silently watching her. She turned. Having disassembled his HK416 in just 30 seconds, and he realized she was far more than just a gun hand. That moment marked the beginning of a journey that would redefine the meaning of respect and professional worth. In the morning, the wind from the Pacific curled across the southern firing range at Camp Pendleton, carrying with it the scent of salt water and the burnt tang of old gunpowder. Hannah Carter stood still, her back to the row of targets, sunlight slanting under the brim of her cap to cast a faint halo on the collar of her uniform, its edges faded from wear. She had just completed the first weapons inspection of the day load. Test, fire, recheck, a routine cycle, but never dull to her. It was now her third week assigned as technical support for the joint training between the Marines and SEAL Team 3, a position not meant to stand out, only to be precise, according to her orders. And indeed, Hannah hadn't stood out. She moved like a shadow between rows of equipment, always appearing before someone needed a weapon and gone before they could manage a thank you. The only problem was, no one thought she mattered. Most of the younger SEALs called her the bolt-turning lady. Some shook their heads when they saw her carefully measure the grip tension on a rifle stock as if tuning a violin. They weren't used to a brown-haired technician, barely 5'3", who could tell the exact revolutions of a drive bolt simply by hearing a click-off by 1,000th of a second. To them, she was an anomaly, a strange deviation in the system. She didn't care. Each day, she arrived earlier than the watchman. She wiped every rail, aligned every red dot sight, tested each slide with the quarter she kept for that purpose, not to impress anyone. But because a life in the field often rested on a mere 1/10 of a second lost to a dust-jammed trigger, this morning, she heard the familiar murmur behind her again, a group of new guys chatting. One laughed loud enough to cut through the wind. "Hey, that tech girl can strip an M4 faster than swapping a tampon," the group chuckled. Hannah didn't turn. She simply set the HK416 down on the felt mat, removed the bolt carrier group as if opening an old window, silent, precise. On her shoulder, her name patch still bore the faint residue of old glue. Carter, H. Blurred but steady. That was when the wind shifted. Heavy, measured footsteps sounded behind her, thudding lightly on the packed gravel. A large shadow fell across her. Without turning, Hannah already knew who was approaching. He was the only person here who could change the air in a room just by stepping into it. Sergeant Nathan Brick Callahan, SEAL Team 3's operational-level weapons maintenance chief, was spoken of as a living legend among Navy armorers. 6 deployments, 3 under-fire weapons repairs, twice fixing an M4 grip in the middle of a contact point. Some said Callahan could gauge a barrel's temperature from its echo. True or not, he'd earned the nickname Brick because, like a brick, he was unshakable, said little, and was always there to keep things from falling apart. Callahan wasn't one to smile, but today he stopped directly behind her, his rough voice breaking the quiet textured with black coffee and hundreds of hours in combat. "You've got the quarter facing the wrong way. Heads up makes it slip easier." Hannah turned. Callahan's steel-gray eyes weren't on her, but locked on the rifle. Yet in that gaze, something had shifted, not recognition, but the first step toward paying attention. She smiled, faintly, the way one nods to a familiar song on the radio. "Is that so? I figured a gun could use a little luck." No reply came, but the air was no longer the same. Can a single quarter break down the invisible wall between doubt and trust? You'll want to stay and see how it does exactly that.
Welcome to Veteran Life Stories, where real sacrifice meets unforgettable storytelling. Subscribe and keep their courage alive.
Hannah couldn't remember the first time she ever held a gun. She only remembered the smell of gun oil soaked into her memory like a fragment of childhood scent, that slick, cold, and strangely clean aroma. Summer evenings in the suburbs of Phoenix, when the neighborhood kids were still splashing water in their backyards, she would sit cross-legged beside her father, under the dim yellow glow of a lone fluorescent bulb hanging from the porch, listening to the click of metal sounding steady as an adult's heartbeat. Her father, James Carter, was a veteran weapons technician with the Desert Rangers, a volunteer paramilitary group specializing in counter-narcotics operations along the Arizona-New Mexico border. He wasn't the talkative type, but each time he stripped down an AR-15, he seemed to become a silent storyteller, steady, deliberate, every motion carrying a message, discipline, detail, and respect for the tools that protect life. A good bullet is the quietest soldier in a fight. He said that when she wasn't yet tall enough to reach a crate of ammunition, Hannah didn't fully understand it back then, but later she realized her father wasn't just teaching her technique, he was teaching her how to be silent and still have worth. She learned to feel a weapon with her fingertips, the way a craftsman feels the grain of wood. When you clean the carbon off a bolt carrier, you can tell who last used the weapon and whether they trusted it. A clean rifle, straight firing with a smooth trigger, was a kind of promise, and in a chaotic world, sometimes that promise was the only thing standing between life and death. Of course, the neighbors didn't see it that way. A girl with guns? You joining the mafia or something? One nearby mother had thrown that line when she caught Hannah cleaning a barrel instead of playing with dolls. The kids were kinder, but not without side eyes every time she brought empty shell casings to school to make decorations. Few understood that to Hannah, an empty casing wasn't a symbol of violence, but of a mission completed. The jabs didn't make her rebel, they just made her quieter. She retreated into a world of her own where every detail had a reason, where every margin of error had consequences. Ironically, the better she got, the more she was pushed aside. In high school, she won first place in a simulated M16 assembly competition, but the gym teacher flat out told her, "You should try out for the girls' baseball team, leave the guy stuff alone." That was the first crack in Hannah's understanding between actual ability and how people treated it. She wasn't angry, not deeply sad either. But with every bolt she tightened, every barrel she polished until it mirrored the light, she poured into it something she couldn't quite say aloud, the quiet kindness of those who choose to do the right thing, even when no one is watching. When she grew up, Hannah didn't choose a traditional college. She applied to the military's technical support program, completing all mechanical proficiency tests in half the standard time. Her instructors called her Ghost Wrench because she finished before others had even begun. By the age of 23, she had worked on more than 80 different weapon systems, from simple pistols to heavy machine guns mounted on armored vehicles. But everywhere she went, the same look followed: skepticism first, acceptance later, and sometimes nothing at all. Camp Pendleton was no different. Only, this time, Brick Callahan's gaze lingered a fraction longer. And maybe, just maybe, for the first time in years, someone was noticing without her having to speak first. Comment 1 if you think this story is worth it, so we know you're still here. That morning began like any other, at Pendleton's sunlight slanting in, gravel crackling under the boots of Marines, and the familiar burnt smell from the firing line. The guns not yet cooled from the previous day's drills, but in the air, there was something slightly different, quieter, a little tighter. Hannah sensed it before she saw them. SEAL Team 3 arrived like a low-pressure front, not loud, but every movement carried weight. They stepped into the technical bay as if the floor had just turned into the deck of a warship. Their eyes swept over each rifle on the racks, hands reaching out, no introductions needed. And then he appeared, the young operator, with a stance that seemed to shorten time by sheer presence. He was the team's lead marksman, holding his HK416 with the ownership of an artist cradling an antique Italian violin. Each step was a note in the silent symphony that special operations units had long since mastered. Hannah stood not far away, drying the fourth operating rod of the day. Light slanted through the window, falling directly on her wrist, where a small scar remained from hot oil splattering her 3 years ago. She looked up, quietly observing. The marksman approached, tested the trigger, tilted the HK416, then gave a brief nod. He was about to leave when Hannah spoke, not loudly, not softly, but at exactly the frequency that makes a person stop. "Do you hear that?" He turned, brow furrowed. No one else in the room reacted, but Hannah had already placed a quarter on the HK's bolt carrier channel, giving it a light shake. The sound that came wasn't metal on metal, it was a faint, dry clink, just slightly offbeat. She didn't wait for a response. Her hands moved like a precisely programmed machine, removing the buffer tube, opening the bolt carrier group, separating the chamber, each motion as exact as if performed by a finely tuned assembly line robot. In under 30 seconds, the rifle lay neatly disassembled on the mat, each component aligned, clean as if it had just left the Heckler & Koch factory floor. She pointed to the back face of the hammer, a small, irregular wear mark so minor an untrained eye might mistake it for dust. But Hannah knew this was the beginning of stress fatigue, the kind that could lock a trigger after 20-30 rounds, especially when the barrel heated. The SEAL looked at her, then back at the rifle. His expression shifted from skeptical to startled, then into a quiet sort of acknowledgement that required no words. Hannah pulled out a tube of specialized lubricant, worked it into the contact point, then reassembled the weapon. She didn't need to look, she listened. When she slid the bolt into final lock, the clack rang out crisp, solid, and in the exact pitch she had memorized at the age of 9, under the dim fluorescent light in her Phoenix backyard. The marksman tested the trigger. His lips pressed together as if to say something, but instead he only nodded slowly. No praise, no handshake, just the rare silence between two people from different worlds, connected by a rifle that had just been brought back to life. The rest of the team saw it but said nothing. They didn't have to. In the military, there's a silent language only those who live at the edge of tolerances understand. It's when you watch someone save your life before you even knew you were about to lose it. Hannah turned away as if nothing had happened. She moved on to cleaning another rifle. But the quarter still sat there, catching the sunlight as if it knew it had just helped rewrite a perception. From across the room, Rick Callahan leaned against the doorway. He didn't intervene, but his gaze, deep, steady, and weighted, was marking something down, not on a report, but in memory. Camp Pendleton at night had a beauty of its own, cold, unyielding, like the soldiers who had passed through it. The sky was no longer blue but shaded into the ash gray of lingering gun smoke. Overhead, the halogen lights from the towers cast a harsh glare onto the rough gravel below, creating no shadows, only exposure. This was the most important drill in the training cycle, a simulated night assault in desert conditions, paired with an artificial sandstorm, a network of high-powered fans, combined with a specialized fine dust to recreate the battlefields of Afghanistan. No one liked it. It numbed the eyes, killed the radio, and destroyed weapons if anyone got careless about maintenance. SEAL Team 3 was split into two elements, advancing on the target from the north and southwest. Everything ran smoothly for the first 10 minutes, the sound of rifle stocks brushing against armor, silent hand signals in the haze, and the familiar mechanical clicks of rounds chambering amid air, thick with machine wind and burnt oil. Then it happened. A dry click rang out. Not the usual sound of a round being chambered, but something off, short of breath, like a whispered warning from the weapon's own body. The lead marksman, the same operator Hannah, had helped strip down an HK416 the day before, stopped. He tried cycling it again, but the trigger was locked, unmoving. The underbarrel grenade launcher was dead as well. Something was jammed, or worse, broken. In the swirling dust, the worst thing wasn't the silence of a dead gun. It was the feeling of being left behind without explanation. The team was forced to shift, losing tempo, losing initiative. In a real engagement, that kind of error could have gotten the whole unit killed. On the perimeter, Hannah sat beside the mobile technical truck. She wasn't part of the drill formation, but as always, she stayed to watch. No one told her to. It was just, she didn't leave when things weren't finished. She heard that click, even from over 50 meters away, and knew it was bad. Without hesitation, Hannah slung her tool bag over her shoulder and pushed through the dust like a mechanic walking into the middle of the desert. No call, no permission. She reached the operator as he was struggling with the rifle. He was about to wrench the stock when Hannah placed a hand on the barrel, not stopping him, but with a clear enough signal, "Let me." Under the dim, dusty light, Hannah's hands didn't shake. She slid a cleaning rod into the gas system and extracted a clump of grit bound together by old oil, a result of a weapon that hadn't been properly flushed after the last drill. Next, she opened the buffer tube, separated the grenade launcher assembly, blew out the debris, reassembled. Every motion was deliberate, without excess or shortage. The whole process took no more than 2 minutes, but in that time, every other sound seemed to vanish. She no longer heard the wind, no longer saw the dust, only the steel, the oil, and the scent of sweat. Her movements were a refrain, each beat echoing from her childhood, from her father, from the nights spent beside an ammo crate under the porch. She didn't scold, didn't lecture. When the rifle cycled again, smooth and precise, she handed it back as if she had merely polished a glass someone had spilled. Then she turned and walked away, leaving a single boot print in the thick dust, the only one heading opposite the SEAL formation, advancing toward the target. The marksman watched her go. He said nothing, but this time his eyes held not surprise, but something closer to gratitude and respect. The drill went on. The formation adjusted its route and completed the simulation on time. In the training report, no one mentioned the minor incident. No credit line was written, but everyone who had been there remembered. And at the weekend debrief, when a training officer asked, "Any suggestions for adjusting technical protocols?" Brick Callahan, the man who was always silent at the back of the room, spoke. "Next time, have Carter check it before we run the course." 1 sentence, 6 words. But for Hannah, it was the first oath she'd ever received that didn't need to be written. My dear viewers, stay tuned for the next part that will make you stop and marvel. Take a second to leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all over the world. There was no award ceremony, no formal commendation, and no trumpet call when Hannah Carter stepped into the technical bay the next morning. But Camp Pendleton, like every training base that has witnessed the silence of courage, had its own way of saying that people had changed the way they saw you. That morning, the sky was slightly overcast. A cloud of ash drifted over the range. Hannah unlocked the armory door on time as usual, stepping inside expecting nothing but the familiar scent of old oil and the creak of worn hinges. But there was something unusual. Someone had neatly reorganized her toolkit, every screwdriver, every bottle of oil precisely in the order she kept them, though no one else had ever bothered to care. In the corner, Ghost, the SEAL marksman she had helped fix an HK416 for, was cleaning his rifle. Light reflected off the metal surface like an unfinished portrait. He didn't look up immediately. Only when she passed by did he stop, turn, squint as if to see her more clearly, and then smile. A very small smile, restrained, almost hesitant, but clear enough. And it came with a nod. "That was different," he said, not loud, not in a commanding tone, but the way someone speaks about a jazz piece unlike anything else, yet one that makes you stop in the middle of the street. For the first time, Hannah didn't feel like she was walking into a room full of eyes watching out of doubt. It was as if, finally, the frequency of those eyes had shifted. Tank, a demolition specialist built like a brick wall, who once scoffed that female techs only know how to read the manual, also approached. He handed over an FNX 45 pistol, asking Hannah's opinion on how to fine-tune the hammer for a quicker strike. Then, as if realizing he'd broken a rule, he shrugged. "Haven't seen a tech this confident and sharp in a long time. Don't fix it for me, just tell me what I'm doing wrong. That's enough." From that day on, the change didn't come in a rush. It seeped into the air, into questions asked at the right moment, into the nameless respect for someone once dismissed as the girl who plays with guns. A new recruit stripping his rifle for the first time asked Hannah, "Which point should I oil first?" That question used to be for Ghost. Now, she was the one they looked to, not because she's a woman and she's good, but simply because she was good. Hannah still didn't speak much. She didn't need to. When someone asked her what lubricant she used for their worn-out saw, she simply handed them the exact green tube, offering a faint smile not to show off, but to say, "I understand." She still cleaned weapons each night, still worked with her quarter, still checked every mechanism as if war could break out tomorrow, but now, each step she took no longer echoed alone. Callahan, the one who used to just watch, began assigning preliminary checks to Hannah before each drill. Not quite a compliment, but trust turned into action. For men like him, that meant more than a handshake. Even the base's administrative office, which rarely cared for temporary techs, unexpectedly invited her to a meeting on upgrading the 2026 weapons maintenance protocols. Not because she was representing women, but because they needed someone with real-world insight, and her name came up as the one who saved the combat simulation from failure. In the mess hall, small taps on the shoulder began to happen. "Carter, that MP7 you tuned yesterday was perfect," or "Heard you know a trick to clean the hammer without disassembly. Willing to share?" Hannah responded simply, nod, demonstrate, then disappear before anyone could say thank you. For her, recognition didn't come from applause, but from people willing to pause, to ask, to listen. That was it. Enough. In a country like the United States where technical roles are still underestimated when paired with gender, Hannah hadn't broken every barrier, nor become the face of a movement. But in a grueling SEAL unit, where every pull of the trigger decides life or death, she had made those who once thought she didn't belong stop, look, and adjust course. Do you think you can guess what happens next? Take a moment, comment number 1, or "I'm still here," to keep listening. The last day always carried a strange kind of quiet. Even though boots still thudded over the gravel, even though commands still barked over the internal radio, the atmosphere at Camp Pendleton that afternoon seemed coated in a layer of sunlit bronze dust, warm, still, and richer than usual. She stood alone behind the technical vehicle, where the gun mat she laid out every morning was spread perfectly squared, neither too much nor too little. The metal parts rested neatly, like chess pieces reset after a match. In the top left corner of the mat, as always, lay the familiar quarter. It bore a small scratch, now a nick along the edge from when it hit the concrete during a hurried maneuver in last week's simulated grenade drill. But today, looking at it, Hannah no longer saw a technical tool, no longer a marker or a way to calibrate sound. She saw a witness, a silent figure that had walked with her through a journey of doubt, dismissal, and the slow shift toward recognition. It had seen her hands accomplish what words never could. And now, It lay there like a quiet congratulation, simple, round, and weighted just enough. In the distance, the SEAL team was lining up for a group photo. A few glanced her way, each raising a silent thumbs up in turn. No names, no well wishes. In the military, there are acknowledgments never put to paper, but carved deeply into memory. Tank, the loud, muscle-bound jokester who loved to make cracks about guns and barbecue, this time simply walked past, leaving a clean, neatly folded gun cloth on her table. He said nothing. But in one corner of the cloth was a stitched line of green thread, the color signifying senior technician status in the team's unofficial hierarchy. Someone had sewn it, and he was the one to deliver it. Ghost, as usual, said nothing. He simply slung the HK416 she had just fine-tuned, giving her a single nod. Perhaps he wanted to say something like, "Thanks for keeping me alive." But instead, he adjusted his sling to sit more snugly. In the language of warriors, that was already a poem. Then, as she was removing her technical jacket, the heavy fabric steeped in gun oil, sweat, and a touch of nostalgia, a figure approached. Not loud, not marked by rank. Just an older man in Air Force intelligence attire, the SOCOM TAC patch on his left shoulder. He handed her a plain white envelope, no sender's name, only a clean printed line, Advanced Technical Combat Program. She hadn't yet asked a thing when he nodded, answering softly. "We've reviewed your file and the field evaluations. You don't just fix weapons, you keep the fight alive." He paused for a beat, then spoke quietly, in what might be the most formal invitation the military could utter. "We want you in the Special Technical Training Program." Hannah looked at the envelope in her hand, then at the quarter. Her chest didn't surge the way books so often describe. No music swelled. There was only stillness. Like a freshly cleaned chamber, a round loaded with a soft click, and everything locking into place without a sound. She smiled faintly, not the smile of celebration, but of quiet agreement with herself. After all the time, the whispers, the glances, she no longer needed to say she was worthy. They had already said it for her in the way they looked, the way they acted, and the way they invited her to step through a new door. As the sunlight began to stretch long across the range, Hannah folded the technical mat for the last time. The quarter was placed in the center, wrapped in the cloth like something precious. No one saw. But she knew it would follow her into whatever came next. On the gravel, her footsteps made no sound, but this time, each one felt lighter. She had once been the girl who cleaned guns. Now, she was the one invited into the United States Special Operations Forces Advanced Tactical Program. Do you see how a small coin can bear witness to an entire life? Not everyone who holds a gun is a warrior. And not everyone who stands behind the line, quietly cleaning each tiny piece of steel, is someone forgotten. Hannah Carter's story reminds us that sometimes courage isn't found at the front lines, it's in the steady hands that keep the front from breaking. In a world that insists on labeling people by gender, role, and appearance, there are still those who choose to answer not with words, but with precise, quiet actions, and in the end, they move others. If you've ever been underestimated, ever endured in silence knowing you were skilled but unseen, then this story is for you. If you feel touched by it, leave a comment, share it with someone you believe needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow the channel, there are many more stories waiting to be told. We see each other in the small details, and those details sometimes are what save an entire battlefield.
Have you ever wondered what happens when a war hero has his honor stripped by the authorities in broad daylight? In Portland, Michael Torres, a 75-year-old former Marine, was forced to endure the mayor's public mockery right in front of Laurelhurst Park, sparking widespread outrage. A moment that seemed destined to be forgotten was suddenly illuminated by a volunteer's video. Can a band of veterans restore his dignity? And how will that little wooden house transform an entire community? Morning mist lay silently over the canopy. Each tiny droplet sparkled like a gem upon the fragile nylon fabric. Michael Torres's tent, a 75-year-old hermit hidden in the city's shadow, heard the weary sigh of autumn wind. Yellow leaves swayed and fluttered to the ground, tracing a hazy path at his feet. He sat motionless, back slightly bent, hands trembling as he stitched a frayed tent hook. Each needle's pull a tolling bell, summoning memories of wounds carried and times long past. The honk of distant horns echoed, mingling with hurried footsteps, like the drumbeat of a sleepless city, sounds of luxury in which he was but a ghost. Michael endured the bone-chilling cold, arms wrapped tightly around himself, clutching for warmth that would not come. Drizzle swept across his face, painting blurred streaks on his rusted wireframe glasses. He blinked, wiped away tears without thinking, not from pain, but from the vertigo of two worlds colliding. Then a sharp voice boomed from a loudspeaker like a dagger's thrust. "Do we stand by and let him live like this? A 75-year-old veteran camping here is only mucking up the park." Each word spat into the air, freezing it in place. Michael looked up. His gaze met faces passing by, some curious, some scornful, most indifferent. He felt every sigh, every glance slide past, and in that moment, his heart constricted with pain. The image of the mayor appeared on the speaker's platform, his polished suit gleaming, posture rigid as steel. His finger jabbed angrily. A mocking grin twisted his powerful face. Michael felt a current of rage pierce his chest. Yet he remained silent, lips sealed, as though to preserve each word of humiliation within. Inside him, memories surged, bombs screaming overhead, sparks flying as he plunged through smoke and flame to rescue comrades. Time and again he had faced death's gate. Time and again he believed he survived to tell the tale. Now, alone in this thin mist, he felt every sacrifice, every hardship, cruelly negated by venomous words. But then, in the depths of despair, something flashed to life, a steadfast pride embedded in a Marine's marrow. He exhaled deeply, his hands stilled. His eyes gleamed with a quiet fire, not blind fury, but resolute calm. Michael realized, though the tent was torn, though the words cut deep, his spirit remained unbroken. He rose slowly. The tent swayed with the breeze. His threadbare clothes clung to his frail frame, but his gaze was steely. He stepped toward the tree line where the narrow park exit lay, seeking a new spark of hope. The mayor's figure receded behind the loudspeaker post, yet in Michael's chest, the flame of camaraderie and honor blazed fiercer than ever. Michael Santiago Torres left his 18-year-old youth with determined eyes, his heart brimming with the desire to defend his country. The image of that young Marine, his face wide-eyed, laced with uncertainty, stepping off the transport ship docked at San Diego Naval Base, marked the beginning of a tumultuous journey through Southeast Asian battlefields. Each day in the jungle fields, under nights pierced only by rocket whistles and ear-splitting cries, etched itself into his soul like indelible scars. In 1976, the hidden tragedy aboard the USS Everspace carved both horror and fierce pride into his memory. That night, the steel fortress shuddered. Fire erupted with savage intensity, black smoke curling like a living nightmare. In the engine room, lit only by the flicker of aged oxygen tanks, Michael heard metal splinter, smelled the acrid sting of burning fuel. Without hesitation, his calloused hand groped through debris. He yanked an unconscious comrade from the inferno. 12 lives were saved by his decisive cuts of the rescue shears. Blood poured from a deep shoulder wound, but Michael felt no pain, for he knew that letting go would snuff out the hope of saving them all. His military career was not defined by that moment alone. Each dawn brought a new trial, waking in a straw hut to the alarm horn echoing through the untamed forest, bracing against the bone-chilling cold of Camp Leatherneck's winter. Under the flickering yellow lamp in the barracks, Michael kept a journal, each line a homesick plea, each word a solemn vow. The brutal war taught him resilience. Amid smoke and gunfire, a young man's heart became as solid as a steel shield. Amid the devastation, he learned that the greatest treasure was not medals or glory, but his comrades, sharing every grain of rice, every drop of water, fighting together for tomorrow. Not until 1985, when the military issued his discharge papers, did Michael stand silent, gazing at the rusted insignia on his chest. He stepped down from the ship, bound for Portland, engulfed by emptiness. His gleaming medals were tucked away in an old wooden box, where only he knew the behind-the-scenes stories. Nights spent awaiting orders, hurried meals wrapped in a single sheet, the hush before the storm of mortar and gunfire. Upon his return, Michael sought out the VFW, a place where laughter mixed with the knock of greeting. Men in faded dress blues spoke of distant battle lines. He joined quietly, sharing his experiences, igniting passion in the next generation. But civilian life was no battlefield. There, psychological wounds smoldered on. Night after night, he dreamed of sirens, jolted awake in his cramped room. Nightmares of comrades' screams, of helplessness as flames engulfed the man beside him, tormented his soul. By day, his body weakened, his health waned. Each step grew more arduous. Pain pulsed from his knee joints, a reminder of days spent carrying a rifle through rugged mountains. As his benefits dwindled, Michael could no longer live independently. He meant to return to the VFW for aid, but veteran pride held him back. Instead, he packed his past away. He trekked slowly to Laurelhurst Park. Beneath a bent lamppost, a nylon tent sprouted like a punctuation mark on a new, lonely chapter. Solitude and abandonment, yet unbowed. Now, Michael sits by the flickering streetlight, eyes thoughtful as passers-by move on. His medals glow faintly in the yellow light when he accidentally touches them, proof of a heroic era. Yet now, they are memories hidden deep within an old soldier's heart. The feeling of being forgotten washes over him, yet his dignity stands unshaken. Michael knows that even as the world spins, even if he is mocked, camaraderie and honor cannot be cast aside. In his soul, that fire still smolders, and as darkness recedes, a spark of hope flickers within, waiting for a brother's hand to ignite it. So, dear viewers, get ready for a story that will leave you in awe. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see people joining us from every corner of the globe. When the video of Portland's mayor appeared on local television, Michael was caught off guard. The image of a powerful man in an expensive suit, pointing his finger directly at Michael's tent, accompanied by public derision, reverberated in his mind like an unending battle drum. In an instant, everything spiraled out of control. The mayor's words laid bare callousness, igniting public outrage. Michael felt his chest tighten as he heard those cutting remarks. He sat with bowed head, yet his heart raced with urgency. Hours later, his old phone buzzed sharply with an automated news alert. The Oregonian asks, Is the mayor justified in targeting a homeless veteran? The comments below teemed with anger and sorrow. Some praised him, some condemned, but most stood with Michael. Thousands of shares and replies. An online storm, yet charged with real-world power. At first, Michael felt bewildered. He wondered, do I deserve this attention? The image of his tattered tent flashed in his mind, battle relics rotting beneath thin nylon. He trembled, not from cold, but from anxiety over what lay ahead. Yet as waves of sympathetic messages appeared, Michael discovered a new side of himself. He still mattered. He still held a place in people's hearts. Soon afterward, a quiet network of volunteers began to emerge. No fanfare, no trumpets. They brought steaming bowls of porridge. They offered warm blankets and tender smiles. Each care package in their hands was a soft pat on a wounded heart. Michael watched, feeling warmth rise within him. He gazed at those outstretched hands and wondered how veteran pride had once buried his own dignity, forcing him to live in hiding. On social platforms, the hashtag #Home4Torres rose like a cleansing wind over dusty memories. It was not just letters on a screen, but a clarion call to conscience. Volunteer footage of Michael accepting a warm bowl, his hands trembling in gratitude, was liked and shared endlessly. Every interaction was a communal heartbeat aligned with his own, an affirmation. We are here. We have not forgotten. Michael sat still, eyes scanning each line on his phone's screen. He saw every tone, from tender words of comfort to public outrage. When leaders stay silent, the people must speak. Emotions welled within him. For the first time in years, he realized he was not alone. His faith in humanity, his trust in community, surged anew. On the first night after the video went viral, Michael could not sleep. He sat in his tent, flashlight illuminating his metals coated in time's dust. Circles of light danced across the wooden box's surface, as if beckoning him to reach out with trembling fingers. He gently lifted each metal, his heart shimmering with emotion, pride for living fully as a veteran, gratitude for strangers' compassion, regret for letting himself slip into darkness. Portland woke up with Michael's story on its lips. People spoke of him not as a pitiable figure, but as a living symbol of courage and pride. Passers-by paused before his tent, saluted him, not merely out of respect for his age, but out of reverence for the unparalleled story behind those solemn eyes. Michael Torres, once a homeless veteran, was now at the center of attention, a triumphant testament to the power of empathy and unity. And in that very moment, Laurelhurst's once bleak scene no longer reflected loneliness. It became a gateway to opportunity, where Michael could stand tall and wait for the next miracle. The moment the hashtag #Home4Torres exploded, a network of former Marines from every corner began to reach out. The simple rallying cry, "What can we do for Torres?" echoed across the web. In solemn determination, they gathered in an old supply warehouse tucked between Portland's streets. Under flickering neon lights, their figures stood silent yet resolute. No instructions were needed. They understood their mission: to rebuild a veteran's faith in his Marine family. At their forefront was former Captain Jackson "Jack" Miller, Torres's comrade throughout the Southeast Asia campaign. When Jack arrived, he carried both stern gravitas and deep responsibility. From across the yard, he eyed Torres thoughtfully. That weary face with blankets slung over shoulder was bound to memories of firestorms where brotherhood had saved lives. Jack tapped lightly on a wooden crate beside a stack of planks, then spoke in a low voice. "We're not just building a house, we're restoring a Marine's trust in his own family." Inside the closed warehouse bay, footsteps blended with the buzz of saws and ring of hammers. The team split tasks, some selecting lumber, others measuring, still others drilling holes for screws. Sweat beaded their brows. Each strike of a hammer drove home the motto, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Their focus made time seem to pause. No one bantered. Only the presence of Marines united in defending a comrade's honor. Michael Torres stood beyond the makeshift fence, watching it all unfold. His mind swirled with emotions, astonishment giving way to deep gratitude. He had never imagined a nationwide Marine community banding together to build him a home. When Jack invited him to help secure the final board, his hands trembled as they touched the wood's edge. Rough veins stood out against salty sweat. He drove in the last nail while watching Jack's every movement, as though reading the unspoken message. We honor you. For the next 5 days, the work never ceased. At dawn, they assembled. At dusk, they silently inspected every joint. The planks formed a sturdy frame. The nails shaped a future. Each Marine told himself, this is more than construction. It's proof of gratitude, of lives transformed when someone stands up for you. As the frame neared completion, inside they arranged a small bed refurbished from reclaimed wood, spread a new blanket, and placed a small table for Michael's tarnished medals. On the opposite wall hung a dignified inscription, Michael S. Torres, U.S. Marine Corps, 1967 to 1985. Warm yellow light illuminated every detail. Jack and the others stepped back, allowing Michael to take in the handiwork. In his eyes, one could see a sky of memories and hope. The handover took place in Laurelhurst Park, before a circle of reporters, volunteers, and neighbors. Jack placed the keys in Michael's hand. His fingers shook as he accepted them, yet the smile he forced carried all the glory of a victor. Jack whispered, as though carried by the dry breeze, "You showed us the true meaning of honor. Now, we give you this home." Those words struck Michael's heart. He could not hold back tears. When Michael stepped into his new home, a sudden calm enveloped him. Each step was heavy, yet steady. He surveyed the wooden floor beneath his feet, the light glowing on the wall emblem, the quiet formation of Marines standing outside. This was no mere shelter. It was living glory, a powerful declaration. Even in the darkest times, the light of comradeship will guide the way. The story of that little house by the park was not tabloid fodder. It was proof of empathy's power and collective duty. Marines framed walls, laid shingles, swept floors. Each silent act rang with the vow, Semper Fidelis. They refused to allow a sacrifice for freedom to be forgotten. They affirmed that those who gave their all would never be left behind. And in that moment, as Michael sat on the wooden chair by the door, hand resting on his medals, he understood. History is not only carved in stone or written in books, it continues in acts of kindness. This home was not an ending, but a beginning. He smiled, eyes shining, ready to write the next chapter of his life, not on the sidelines, but embraced at the center of his beloved Marine family. They said his life had run dry of hope, but when he first touched that key, Michael Torres understood a new chapter was beginning. The 4-meter-long, 3-meter-wide wooden house stood proudly amid Laurelhurst Park, its insulated metal roof reflecting the dawn light, its glass door shimmering like eyes full of promise. Above the gate, a neat plaque read, Michael S. Torres, U.S. Marine Corps, 1967 to 1985. That was more than a name carved in wood. It was a reminder of a storied past and a pledge to the future. On Sunday morning, Michael woke before sunrise, his breath tinged with the scent of fresh wood stain. He stepped slowly onto the front porch, where the boards still radiated warmth after the veteran's labors. A faint smile played at his lips. He traced each grain, each plank, each joint sealed by nails, marks of brotherhood and silent devotion. Clutching his old jacket, he placed a hand over his heart, as if to preserve the fervor carried from distant battlegrounds. At 9 o'clock prompt, Jack Miller and his fellow Marines appeared in silent formation. They lined up in 2 rows and saluted solemnly. The click of cameras in the press, the soft drum beat over the loudspeaker. Dozens of volunteers, hundreds of eager eyes, yet the moment's center was Michael. The man who had weathered bullets, now standing among brothers, ready to receive the greatest gift of all, a home. Jackson Miller, hair speckled with gray, stance still unbowed in his old uniform, stepped forward. He nodded, emotion glistening in his eyes. Lifting a gleaming brass key in his left hand, he spoke in a husky yet clear voice. Michael, this house is not just for you. It's for our story. To remind everyone that honor never fades. Miller's smile was as warm as a final campfire glow on a frontier night. Michael's hands trembled as he reached for the key. Bony fingers curled around it. Symbol of reclaimed freedom, of a right to call this place home. As the key settled in his palm, the crowd erupted in applause, the sound heavy with feeling. Michael closed his eyes as waves of emotion crashed over him. Joy tinged with astonishment, gratitude tinged with abiding pride. He needed a moment to still his shaking hands. He breathed deeply, then whispered, "Thank you, all of you." After his hesitant thanks, Michael was guided inside. The Marines had arranged everything with care. A fresh wooden bed stood ready, its mattress soft, welcoming his weary frame. On the wall, his medals glowed faintly under their velvet cloth. A small bookshelf by the window held black and white photos. The day he enlisted, the day he saved his comrades. Sunlight filtered through the glass, painting warm streaks across the floor. Michael inhaled deeply, his eyes lit with new fire. His heart sang, as if this house itself were breathing. When Michael stepped into the small yard, folding chairs set in neat rows, volunteer teenagers in uniform clumsily applauded him. Michael smiled. His gaze swept the crowd, seeking anxious faces, tense eyes, then offering reassuring nods. In that moment, he was no longer the shivering homeless veteran. He was a brother, a guide for those who felt lost. The handover ceremony ended, but the home's warmth never waned. In the days that followed, it became a gathering place. Each afternoon, Michael sat on the prepared wooden chair on the porch, welcoming anyone, from the clumsy friend bearing vegetarian meals to the recovering youth seeking direction. He spoke of his Marine days, the horn blast on ship decks, the final breaths of comrades, the power of decisiveness. His voice was calm yet weighty, leaving listeners spellbound, as though receiving life's greatest secret. His battlefield stories were more than memories. They were lessons in courage and service. Michael taught them how to keep perseverance aflame when all seemed lost. He showed each young person how to lift heavy burdens, to steady their breath in panic, and to let go of worries beyond their control. He passed on not just experience, but hope. After every session, his audience saw themselves in his tale, no longer afraid, but empowered to rise. In their eyes, Michael recognized the true meaning. A home is more than shelter. It is a channel for faith and strength. Each dusk, when sunset light painted the window frame, the sound of laughter, of pens scribbling notes, even a tear or two, all blended into a symphony of hope. When night fully fell, Michael switched off the light and listened to the hush. He smiled, as if telling himself, "Life still surprises us. Once gratitude is kindled, loneliness fades away." That small wooden house stood witness to brave hearts, and to the one thing no one can take away, the human spirit's will to overcome. A month had passed since the moment Michael Torres felt the brass key in his hand, and that warm wooden house had become a living symbol for the entire neighborhood. A few days after the handover, a handwritten letter from St. Mary's Church appeared at his gate, offering sponsorship to expand space for fellow veterans. The hurried yet heartfelt note read, "You are never alone." Michael read it over and over. His heart felt recharged, 1,000 beams of light dancing across his weathered face. The church, local schools, and small businesses all joined in. They donated materials, they shared the labor of building, they even launched job counseling programs for returning soldiers. Laurelhurst Community Center quickly organized a workshop titled From Tent to Porch. In that solemn setting, Michael shared his own story of lonely nights in a nylon tent when he thought his honor was fading like a distant memory. Cheers rose up. Silent tears traced the cheeks of others who had endured similar fates, proof of the power in reignited hope. Now, Michael stood not just under a street lamp, but on the stage of compassion. Every talk he led overflowed with attendees, veterans, at-risk youth, even those newly emerging from mental health crises. He listened to every story. He paused meaningfully before offering advice steeped in a lifetime of combat. Don't let the past tear apart your future. Each taut steel cable on the battlefield is stronger than the man who carries it. Use it to bind your hope. In the community center's cozy room, Michael taught young people how to structure daily routines. He spoke of the importance of restful sleep, of taking small steps back into society. His eyes shone with undimmed resolve. The youth listened intently. They jotted down every note. When Michael spoke of nights under bombardment, they looked at him with admiration. When he described life's pressures, they felt relief, knowing they were not alone. Beyond counsel, Michael joined in hands-on community work. He and volunteers meticulously organized the lending library. They selected books on psychology and life skills. He oversaw every meeting, constantly encouraging, "A new day is an opportunity to change." Those brief, impactful words echoed in listeners' hearts, conveying warmth and certainty. His influence spread, showing everyone that even from the lowest starting point, one can rise to the heights of hope. One weekend, Laurelhurst Park rang with children's laughter during the Little Ones and Old Marine program. Michael stood beside them, handing out small books and telling stories of teamwork, of soldiers ready to lay down their lives. The children's eyes brightened. Some ran to embrace him, seeking a share of the warmth born of sacrifice. Every now and then, Michael gently patted their heads, his gaze reflecting simple, profound joy. Day by day, unfamiliar faces became familiar friends. Utility bills, small expenses, were covered by the Veterans Support Fund. Each month, the center hosted meetings where Michael and old comrades spoke with local leaders about support policies. They discussed job training programs, mental health counseling services, and plans to build more safe homes for veterans. Every new initiative was a promise and a responsibility from the community to those who defended freedom. As dusk settled, Michael often sat alone on the front steps, gazing at Portland bathed in lamplight. The scene felt peaceful in a way he had never known. His spirit no longer felt the cold drizzle of loneliness. It brimmed with the sunshine of kind souls, of faith in justice and solidarity. He welled up with gratitude that fate had given him the chance to stand again after such painful falls. He whispered softly, "This is home. This is a beginning." Michael's journey, from homeless veteran to inspiring mentor, was not just about rebuilding material life. It was the rebirth of faith. It was the spirit of Semper Fidelis, urging comrades to stand together. When a community rises to protect one who once protected the nation, it sends a powerful message. No one is left behind. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see someone tuning in from around the world. Comment number 1, if you found the story compelling, so we can continue bringing you even more great stories.